Hi everybody, so I've been doing quite a lot of malt focused kind of beers or more malt forward recipes anyway recently, and I quite fancy doing something a little bit more fruité for this brew. So we're going to be doing a tropical pale ale, which is going to have some Galaxy in it, some Vic Secret, so big tropical Australian hops, and a little bit of a secret weapon for this one, which is Imperial citrus yeast. So yeah, a perfect recipe for a cold windy night in February. Right, so a quick shout out to Gareth on the Homebrewing UK forum, which is where I kind of got the inspiration for this recipe from. So they did a little competition for pale ales over there, and Gareth actually won that competition with a recipe that he did using, I think, Galaxy and Ella hops. So again, it was definitely an Australian sort of themed brew. He used the White Labs 644 yeast, which I believe is the same strain as the Imperial citrus. It's marketed as a kind of wild yeast, but it's now being used a lot in kind of pale ales and New England IPAs. I think it's also half of the dry hop blend from Imperial is also citrus as well, and I think the sort of Vermont or Conan strain maybe that they call it, I'm not sure. Anyway, so yeah, thanks Gareth for inspiration for the recipe. I need to use up some hops because I've got an absolute shit ton of them in the freezer, especially as I won one of Timmy Jenkins' hop raffles recently. So if you haven't seen the hop raffles that he's doing, check them out on the Facebook group. So I think he's pretty much posting them up in all the main UK brewing groups on Facebook now. Basically sort of PayPal him £5 and get a entry for a 10-place raffle. You could win some hops. I managed to win 1.5 kilos of hops. I got some Citra, Equinox and Chinook. So yeah, I've got loads. I need to brew some hoppy beers, so there's going to be a few big pale ales and maybe a New England IPA or two coming up in the near future to try and make some headway into them. Anyway, let's look at the recipe for this beer quickly. So we have a pale ale recipe using 3.5 kilos of pale ale malt. I'm using Baird's pale ale malt for this. I've put in half a kilo of Vienna malt. I'm also using another ingredient that's new to me today, as well as the yeast, which is Simpson's Golden Naked Oats. So I know that they are used a lot by quite a few breweries and home brewers as well in the kind of big juicy pale ales or New England IPAs. And I've had a little chew on a few of those, and they are really tasty, nice kind of nutty, sort of creamy oat flavour to them, so hopefully that will kind of transfer to the beer. And then 200 grams of caramel. So a fairly simple pale ale, or hazy kind of pale ale recipe, I guess. It's pretty close to being a New England IPA, I would guess, really, this recipe, but I think with the slightly lower strength of it, so it's probably going to come out about 5.6, 5.7% in the end. It's more, I guess, pale ale territory in terms of the strength and so on. However, hopping wise, it's definitely got enough hops to potentially be classed as a New England IPA. So I'm using a small addition of Magnum for bittering, but that's only to contribute about 12 IBUs, so 8 grams of Magnum. Then everything else is steep or whirlpool, and then 2 dry hops afterwards. So 40 grams of Galaxy, 30 grams of Vic Secret, whirlpool for 20 minutes at 80 degrees, which will actually still give me about 22 IBUs. So there's a significant amount of bitterness coming in from the whirlpool, and there'll probably be a bit from the dry hopping as well. And then we're going to do 2 dry hops, so 60 grams, split half and half, so 30 grams and 30 grams of Galaxy and Vic Secret for the first dry hop, and then the final dry hop, just adding another hop in there as well, just to beef things up a bit. So 40 grams Vic Secret, 30 grams of Galaxy, and then a little bit of Mosaic as well, so 30 grams of that too. So 238 grams of hops in total, and and obviously, as I said, we'll be fermenting it with the Imperial citrus yeast. So this stuff is quite interesting. It is the equivalent of, as I said, WLP 644 as far as I'm aware, which is the Bruxellensis Trois yeast, which is being used quite a bit by a few people for bringing in some of the real kind of pineapple-y, fruity esters into well, these sorts of beers really. So if you want a big tropical kind of pale ale, it's really upping the flavour contribution from the yeast in that sense. So Imperial described this strain as cranking out orange and lemon aromas along with some tropical fruit. You can use it at high temps for really big ester production. It's a wild Saccharomyces strain, which can get a little bit funky, but without the concerns of using a Brett strain. So it's considered a wild yeast, but it's not going to get you know, everything infected like Brett would. So looking forward to using that. Actually, it should be really good. Heard lots of positive feedback on it, especially from Gareth over at the Home Brewing UK forum, and it should work really well, fingers crossed, in this beer with these hops. So yeah, let's see how it goes. Right, so there it is, the tropical pale ale. It certainly looks the part there, so pretty hazy, as to be expected with the amount of dry hops that have gone into that. It has only been in the keg for 4 or 5 days now, so even if it is going to clear down a little bit, it's not really had long enough for that to take effect. This yeast is supposed to be quite flocculent, so it may yet drop out of suspension a little bit, but a lot of that is obviously due to the dry hop as well, so it may not drop clear anyway. Yeast didn't quite ferment out as much as expected, so it did stop at 1014 as you saw in the video. So it's ended up about 5%, which is fine by me. It's a nice sessionable strength. It was supposed to be a bit stronger according to the predicted attenuation for the yeast, but it didn't quite go as high as expected. But no real issue with that, to be honest. Aroma wise, It's definitely got a nice kind of tropical fruit aroma, as I was hoping for. It's got there's a definite kind of orangey, zesty orange, almost like orange sherbet thing going on there, which is quite nice. I think I do get pineapple, which is one of the predominant flavours from Vic's Secret usually. Yeah, maybe a little bit peach on there as well. It's not massively pungent, not quite as pungent as I would have expected with those types of hops and the quantities that they went in at on there, but it's definitely very pleasant. So enough sniffing, let's do some drinking. It's nice and fresh tasting, but it hasn't got that kind of hop burn that you sometimes get when you drink these beers very early on. The first couple of pints off of the keg did have a little bit of a intense bitterness to them, because I think you get a little bit of that hop particulate, really fine hop particles coming through at the bottom of the keg when you first drink beers like this, but it's settled down a bit now. It does have some nice bitterness to it, but it's at that kind of pale ale level, so not quite kind of IPA bitterness, which was kind of what I was hoping for. So I didn't want it to be completely, bitter free like a New England IPA. I wanted it to be more like a pale ale with a bit more, of a kind of kick to it, which just makes you want to come back for another drink, which is what it's doing. And it's got a nice kind of tart, citric kind of bite to it at the end as well, which is nice. Flavour wise, it does have a bit of that kind of orange juice, breakfast juice kind of flavour, maybe a little bit of kind of grapefruit tang to it as well. I would say I'll get a bit of the pineapple on the flavour as well, which is kind of quite a sharp tart fruit flavour sometimes too. Yeah, so maybe it's a little bit more citrusy than I was expecting. Perhaps with those two hops I might have thought I'd get a little bit more of the slightly more tropical fruit flavours in it. Sort of passion fruit, melon, pineapple, that kind of thing. There are some notes of that, but I think there's maybe a little bit more of a citrusy kind of kick to it, which I guess isn't that surprising considering I used the yeast called citrus to ferment it. But yeah, it's still very nice. If I did it again, I might just try a slightly different hop combo maybe, but this is very decent and it's going to get drunk pretty quick. So thanks again to Gareth for the recipe on this, and that's definitely one that I will be using in future and adapting for other beers as well. So cheers everyone.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, that or his dudeness or duder or El Duderino.